Breaking the Gray.
Welcome to Breaking the Gray, a podcast network that sheds light on and breaks open the gray areas between our divided worlds.
Our goal when we created this was that our audience could learn something new, that they could apply to their life today. We unfurled new, unheard perspectives on some of the world's most radical trends, new thinking, and amazing innovations. And Paul, I'm going to guarantee one thing, is that our audience's minds are going to be blown wide open.
Well, Russ, that makes us the audio activists for new voices and real conversations with experts on a whole bunch of areas like health, culture, science, politics, entertainment, and beliefs that you, Russ, and our audience cannot imagine.
And you know what that means, Paul?
What?
To be influencing our audience's perspective and how, you know what, they might even live a little longer as well.
Damn.
I'm Russ Eisenman.
And I'm Paul Wood. And this is our podcast series, Rebel Scientist, where we will talk with scientist and biohacker Sarah Turner.
Sarah's the best.
She is. We love Sarah.
We do. We do. And we learned so much about our bodies from Sarah. So will you. All right. Welcome. We are here. And this is our first introduction to what I like to call the journey into how to keep your body and mind healthy and sane going into this 21st century and understanding what the heck is going on. We're going to introduce an incredible topic, which is biohacking from our leading expert, Sarah Turner. I am Russ Eisenman. I will be your host and your guide through this journey. I'm just an interested and concerned human trying to figure out how to keep myself healthy as I'm in my mid-40s and in the middle of trying to get out of my our lockdown here in 2020 and looking forward to diving into some incredible topics. And I want to hand over to our resident rebel scientist, Sarah Turner. And just welcome. I'm so glad you made the time for us and for our listeners.
Hey, Russ. Yeah, it's really great to be here with you.
Well, this is an incredible time of our lives. I think unprecedented to say the least. And why? I'm so curious, just to kind of get into biohacking. Why is biohacking important?
I think biohacking is important right now because it's about taking responsibility. And we find ourselves in this crazy time where we've got influences from all different areas and information just coming at us at such a rate. Biohacking is a way to kind of go inwards a little bit and use yourself as an experiment and really try to do the best you can to keep yourself healthy and to keep yourself on top and to keep yourself at optimum performance and kind of ride this crazy wave that we're on right now.
Yeah, it's like taking ownership at this point, right? I mean, you actually can.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We relied so much in our lives on doctors and scientists and everyone to kind of tell us that this is the right way to do it, and these are the things that we need to do to stay healthy, get better. We have our mother who rings in our head to wear our socks when we're sick and drink warm soup when we have a cold. Who do we trust?
Well, it's going back to some of that wisdom, actually, going back to some things which are just general common sense. But also, like I say, there's so many resources on the internet. I think really it's about navigating it in such ways, what rings true to you, as much as possible to follow up on your resources and do your own research, which is the cool thing about the biohacking. I mean, most of the people in the biohacking world are autodidacts in that they're kind of self-taught with all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And really, I think there's no excuse now. We have access to so much more information than we ever did before. And it is easy enough to kind of take in these people that have got this fascinating information, but then kind of go back, check your facts, go over it, what makes sense, go to these events. There's some great resources that we have access to. We should be using.
And I think I'm putting my trust in you now. I have listened to the doctors,
dear.
I've listened to the scientists. We're going to put our trust in you, and really, getting a sense of your learning and really, your devotion to this. And I think it's important that we get your background and understanding, so people really can believe that you are a person here to be trusted, and that there's a lot of doors to be opened and a lot of doors to be understood as we go into this. But how did you get started? What were the things that drove you into this practice?
Well, I had an interest in health really from a very young age, and in investigation. I mean, I think it probably started off very early in my childhood. My dad got very bored of the Mr. Men books and whatever very quickly, and started to read me Sherlock Holmes and all kinds of stuff at a very young age. But that kind of got me interested in how you can investigate things for yourself. And I went on to study various things at school and university with a focus mainly on biology. At the time, I actually went to an all-girls school where it was very unladylike to study science. So I studied science and art, which kind of gave me a very strange education, but led me towards more biology than medicine, because obviously I didn't have what you need to do to get to medical school. But it was very interesting, and it actually led me to study not only biology, but psychology. And I went on also to study nutrition. I've studied clinical neuroscience. So I have a fairly broad scientific background, but mainly the focus has always been on biology.
So you're saying that in high school, that's when you started giving yourself the name, the rebel scientist, rebelling against trends and norms, and studying science. It's perfect. We get it.
Yeah, yes, no, that wasn't quite the case, but I think I probably was given that name by others when I was at school, unfortunately, maybe for the wrong reasons. Yeah.
So you study psychology, you study biology, you study chemistry. What stands out to you? What were the things that you just were drawn to as you kept going deeper and deeper into science?
I think just the fascination with biology. To me, it's an endless source of fascination. How we actually work, how we function, how we carry on, how we actually even do the things that we can do. How the body heals by itself. We have this huge capability, and really this huge, very, very intricate machinery that we're made of, and how that all comes together. I mean, I think to me it will be an endless source of study. I will never ever get tired of it, because there's always more things coming out, more things to discover. You can go into such detail, you can pan out, and you can look at a more holistic way of the systems biology. And I think really I'm just a bit baffled that other people aren't as fascinated as me. And so, when people say, why are you fascinated? I think, oh my goodness, why are you not studying biology?
I think it's because it scares us all. To the more we know about our body, the more it scares us. But I think that it's complex. It's a very, very complex thing, and we live with it every day. We are in it every day, and I think our soul decides, probably, let's not understand it too much. Let's just accept that it is what it is, because the more we know, the more we probably will scare us. I don't know, but I mean, I imagine you go off to university. You're probably living a typical university life, having fun, going out, doing the things you do. But you're also learning about science and learning about biology and the body. Do you balance that more because you know more about the body? Like, do you drink less because your friends are drinking because you know more about your body?
Oh, well, yes. Yes. I would like to say yes to that, but no, of course not. That's definitely not how it went. But while I was at university, I was also working, and I was working in a pharmaceutical company. So that kind of gave me a bit of a different grounding, because that was studying pharmacology, which of course is another whole different subject, the whole drug industry and how drugs are affecting your health. So I had very open eyes, but no, of course that doesn't stop you being a teenager.
Yeah. It's interesting because pharma really is a way of biohacking. Is it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's definitely a hack, isn't it? I mean, I think the biohackers would say, that's not the kind of hack that they're talking about.
Right, right.
But you're right. Of course, you're right. Anything that's having that influence on your biology. I mean, if you have a pain, yeah, it's a hack to take a painkiller,
Yeah.
paracetamol, whatever you take. But you pay. They're hacks that you kind of pay for as well. That's
Yeah, no, it's true. I have a storied history with my body. I cancer survivor for 25 years. I was 21. I was riddled with cancer in my lymphatic system, and they just gave me a bunch of drugs, and I got better. I went through radiation, I got better, but I basically poisoned the inside of my body to get healthy, and that's fantastic. I trust science because of that. It saved my life, but at the same time, I'm still carrying around a lot of a lot of toxins in my body from the radiation treatment. When you study pharma and you understand that these are potentially toxins going into your body, how does that affect your view of health as you're studying health?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly you made a trade-off there, didn't you? And it's one that, seems like, that was a good deal, really. You had, yes, you may have introduced toxins to your system, but that could have saved your life. So I'm certainly not into big pharma bashing. And I think that there is, there's some amazing research that's been done, and there's some amazing drugs out there that are actually saving people's lives. But there is a trade-off. And so I think it's all about weighing that up and saying, okay, these particular drugs may be good for this, but, is the trade-off worth it? And certainly for a lot of illnesses that we're facing in Western society, probably not. There are a few, like you say, if you have a cancer and then you have a drug to get over it, fine. But for things like asthma, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, there may be other ways that you can hack your biology that's not a pharmaceutical intervention. So I think it's about, having a balanced view about that.
When you study pharma, I imagine you're doing a lot of work in labs. You're doing a lot of experiments. What were some of the things you worked on?
Well, actually, when I first started out, I was working with vitamins. So, that was cool. But I learned all the lab work there. I did a lot of the lab, learned how to analyze things there. But then I went on mainly to look at asthma drugs. But when I say the drugs, I wasn't in the chemistry department so much as I was in product development. Sorry. So like how you deliver the drugs to the body. And this is a whole other part of the pharmaceutical industry. But what I found was that the way that you deliver specifically asthma drugs to the body has a huge effect depending on things like the plastics that you use. And so I was doing some crazy experiments where they had me in like rubber boots or lab coats with silver thread, all kinds of things to look at static charge, for example. And I think that was probably my epiphany to the understanding that we're kind of like a hybrid with our environment. You can't really separate the person from the environment. And really, in all of those experiments, it showed to me, okay, really what we're doing is we're changing these drug delivery systems when really we could be changing our own systems, and that would have the same effect. So something, for example, as simple as grounding could have a huge effect on asthma because of the way that drugs actually work in the lungs. Drugs are very much affected by the charge we have in our bodies. So the big companies are looking to change the products. They're not looking for the very, very simpler solution, which would be to dissipate the charge in the person. So to me, that was one of my epiphany moments is, okay, this is interesting, but really we should be looking at, okay, how can we modify the environment and the organism rather than just keep on upping the dosages of the drugs?
Yeah. It's interesting that was the area that you spent time on, especially knowing that there's this kind of a theory that you're starting to form in your mind. It sounds like around the entirety of the body, right? And the fact that we are one with the environment we live in. We are part of the environment we live in. So I imagine that the ecosystem within the body is sort of the same thing. That within your body, it's it's a holistic thing. It's a holistic approach. Where did you go next? What did you do after pharma? What was the path you took after that?
Well, when I'd sort of had that brainwave, really about, okay, it's more about the person than the actual drug. I actually studied nutritional medicine for a while there, and opened a health food shop and a cookery school and all kinds of other stuff really around food, because I thought, okay, this is something that you can control, and you can then affect, the person in such a way that they become healthier, and so then that changes the drugs you need, your psychology, the whole thing. So I did that for a while, but it was limited in its approach, again, because it's not holistic. If you're still just looking at one thing, and even if it's something like food, which is cool, and I'm all for nutritional medicine, it was not holistic enough. So I went and did clinical neuroscience with a view to looking at, okay, how can I bring the mind into this? Because I was very much focused on the body. How can I sort of have the body-mind thing going on? And then while I was studying the neuroscience, I also got involved in an alternative medicine company. So I was then trying to look at things for a much more holistic approach. And it was when I say alternative, it was very alternative. We were looking at consciousness interfaces and how you can affect random event generators by focused intention. It was kind of very much the opposite end of the scale from what I'd done before. So I think, I was like a pendulum, where I was sort of very much into just chemistry and pharmaceuticals and that mechanistic way of thinking. And then I went totally the other way to that more intuitive, esoteric, dare I say, woo-woo world.
Yeah. But then that's a completely different type of study. You're in the lab, you're working on the delivery mechanism of drugs. Now you're in an alternative medicine world, and you're looking at the holistic body, and you bring up the mind. What kind of research are you doing now? What are you studying to kind of understand how the mind and the body work together?
Well, at that time, like I say, I was doing some very fringe research, like say using event generators or pseudo-random event generators in computers, and looking to see the effect of focused intention, looking to see if you could deviate randomness, and if you could then actually use that as some kind of way to measure health. That's what I was doing then. I was also looking at imprinting information structures onto water. That's one of the things there where I was, again, and I was also having people approach me that were doing all different kinds of these maverick science studies. I went to MIT, which was the Maharaja Institute of Technology in Pune in India, where there people were taking scans of auras and using their thumbs to imprint to kind of make a hologram of their bodies, and then looking to see, Kirlian photography, all of those fairly out there fringe things. But, very serious scientists actually were presenting their research, and I was going to various labs looking at this research. It was a very, very interesting time.
Yeah, I'm so intrigued. I wish we could just open a bottle of wine and sit here and talk about just that part of your life, because it is fascinating. But that gives you a very different perspective on science than other scientists that and so when you think about that, I mean, how do you apply that science perspective to this topic of something like biohacking? I mean, it seems like a very natural place for you and a comfortable place for you based on your perspective. But how do you kind of apply that perspective to biohacking?
Well, actually, the biohacking movement is very open-minded to this kind of discussion about consciousness, energy fields, subtle energies, those kinds of things having an influence on biology. And I think it's because it's not such a rigorous scientific discipline as yet. It's mainly citizen scientists who are just interested and who are using their own bodies to experiment with. Mm-hmm. So from that point of view, I've found that people are very open-minded. And in fact, I do still meet a lot of people who are doing this kind of science. And I belong to a group called the Science of Consciousness Group, which is held every other year in Arizona. And they're very academic people that are not, they wouldn't call themselves biohackers, although they are doing that kind of thing, but they are looking at this from the point of view of quantum physics. So now all of that woo-woo science is being kind of validated in these labs by people who are interpreting it through the lens of physics. So in actual fact, it doesn't take much to find people who are doing science that backs up some of these more esoteric studies. And I think right now we're in this fabulous time in history where these disciplines are all starting to come together and people are being a lot more open-minded and are looking at things in a much more rigorous way, which is super cool.
It's fascinating because you don't have the same resources that you have in, the big pharma world to do these things. Does that mean that are you using your own body? Are you actually doing things to yourself to kind of look at the practical effects of this?
Yeah, well, that's the fundamentals of biohacking. I mean, in fact, it used to be called the quantified self movement before it was biohacking, which means exactly that. It means monitoring things that you're doing to your own self. And yeah, I've met some crazy people who are doing all kinds of things and using themselves as a test subject. And I think if you're talking about science really is about observation and experimentation. That's basically what science is. And so if you can actually do the experiment yourself, you're going to learn so much more than if you read it or, if it's some kind of stuffy academic subject. So I think that's the brilliant thing about these health related topics is you can do that. To a certain extent. I mean, not always. I mean, like say things like biophotons, you have to have special equipment. Some of these energies, you need measurements and, so there are labs that are doing it. Like you say, it's very, very, very underfunded because people don't have the money to do it, but it is happening. It is happening on a relatively small scale.
Well, without someone like you, there would be no new thing to study. I'm curious where when you finally get to this place where you are today, the audience, myself, listeners, I don't know what area you've landed in, but I'm curious, what's your specialty now?
So my specialty now, I would say, is the topic of photobiomodulation, which is using light to modulate your biology or to change your biology in some way. The reason that I'm focusing on that topic is because in amongst all of this, we had this kind of my trajectory. I then moved to California. And in California, that's really where I got exposed to a lot of the biohacking movement. There's a lot going on in California, from a science point of view, that it's much more open-minded. And where I found myself living, which was Santa Cruz, just by San Francisco, I had Silicon Valley on my doorstep. I had San Francisco there, Google there. There's all of these people that are doing this quite incredible science. And I actually could go and speak directly to the people that were actually doing this research. I mean, the Sophia University was open like once a month. You could go there. Berkeley, I attended quantum physics lectures in Berkeley, integrated science I did in California. So that I think was where I totally was able to explore all of these topics. And out of all of the topics that I ended up exploring, this idea of light and our interaction with light. I mean, it's a broad topic because we can talk about biophotons, the light that we emit, or we can talk about the environmental light, or we can talk about light as therapy. But to me, that's the most interesting thing. I mean, even the topic of what is light, we don't even know what it is. And, that's where we're at with it. We have this substance, wave, particle, there's so many different ways to talk about it. And so I've spent really the last 3 or 4 years of my life just focusing on that topic. And I've tiny scratched the surface of it.
Yeah, there is a rock on the moon right now that has no idea what you're talking about. And it is fascinating. And I'm hopeful when we start to really get into this with this season that we spend a lot of time on light. Yes. Because I think it's important. Plus, it's your passion, and we need to talk about your passion. Totally, yes. But it is, the more I hear you talk, I'm excited to jump into that. when you think about, you mentioned Berkeley, you mentioned, the MITs of the world and the people you've interacted with in your life and you've met. Who are your heroes? Who are the ones that you look to as sort of your guides through this world?
So certainly, relatively recently, people that I have had the good fortune to meet who are involved in some of this science, I would say Dr. Mei Wan Ho. She was an inspiration to me. She was a lovely lady that I saw, first of all, on the circuit of people talking about quantum physics as it relates to biology. That was her thing, and she's most famous for talking about quantum jazz. She wrote several books, which are fabulous books. A very holistically thinking lady, very inspirational. And I actually interviewed her at her home. She lived in London. So I got to meet her, which was just great. And she was talking to me a lot about water at the time, and how light affects water. And I know we'll probably talk about that further down the line, but definitely Sure. She was a great inspiration. And I'm very pleased to have met her because unfortunately she's now passed away. Who else? Yeah. I would like to mention Dr. Jack Cruz. He's also someone who I've followed, and I've had the good fortune to be in his company many times, interviewed him many times, and he's a neurosurgeon, and he's in from around about New Orleans, Mississippi, way, originally from New York. But he's very outspoken, but he definitely brings in a completely new approach to biology, which is very much based on quantum physics. And I think I probably learned more from listening to him and his podcast than I did in my whole science degrees, because he has a way of saying things which makes you understand it from that very unique viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, you are my Dr. Jack Cruz. And I am very excited to take this journey with you. I'm as we wrap this up for today, I want to let's how would you describe your perspective, the mix of fact and belief, and then from that, what are some of the predictions that you're going to kind of help us see through as we see this world?
So what I'm hoping that we're going to start to uncover is this idea that we're not separate from our environment. And I think that's something that has held us back, moving forward with medicine, that we have this idea that we're totally separate from our environment, we're separate from other people, that we can do things in isolation. That's one myth that I hope that we're going to explore and talk about. Okay, how can we have this more holistic view of ourselves and where we're at that will help us to move forward with our health? And the other thing that I'm hoping we can talk about a bit is because we do now find ourselves in this strange COVID-19 world where everything that we thought has been turned on its head a bit, and we're now, most of us are fairly isolated, travel is restricted, there's new limitations that we hadn't really bargained for a year ago. And how can we navigate that with a bit of grace? Because I think most people are frustrated and mystified by some of the things going on, maybe even frightened by some of the things that are going on. Yeah. So how can we kind of think about how we can navigate this strange world and actually use things to our advantage, maybe adopt some different ways of thinking, different health techniques. So I think that would be cool to go through that with you.
I'm incredibly excited. I think, at some point we're going to be able to break the seal, open the door of our quarantine homes and come out into the light and give each other big hugs, high fives, what have you. As we look at that, you yourself are doing a little bit of traveling coming up next, safely, of course, but you're going to a conference that you mentioned that would be of interest, I think.
Yes, I'm going to Finland, which to the Biohacking Summit there, which is one of my favorite events. It's something that I look forward to all year. And it's a group of individuals who they always put on a good show, but more than that, there's a lot of information. There's going to be a lot of speakers. I expect there's going to be a lot of video speakers this year. But I'm hoping that they're going to have people there. They're in Finland. It's a fairly open country. So I'm very hopeful for that. And I'm looking forward to telling you all about it.
Well, you will be a rebel scientist on the ground. Looking
Yes, the
forward
roving
to
rebel
a lot of,
scientist.
yes, exactly. So yes, get your trainers ready.
Yes.
Get your water bottle ready. Yeah, get your masks on and enjoy. We look forward to hearing all about it next week. And thank you for being our partner on this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, Russ.
You too. Thanks so much.
Take care.
The Rebel Scientist Podcast is a Breaking the Gray production. Created by Russ Eisenman and Paul Wood. Hosted by Sarah Turner. Music and sound editing by Logan Shea. For more information and other fantastic podcasts, visit breakingthegray.com. That's gray with an E. breakingthegray.com.
Breaking the Gray.